Imagine a grown man letting out a scream that sounds like a goat on the edge of a meltdown. That was me, the moment my daughter's therapy llama let out its heartbreaking final cry in our backyard. But hold on, we're not quite there yet. Let's rewind 3 weeks, when my biggest headache was puzzling over why my sprinkler timer kept buzzing like it was haunted by the spirit of a disgruntled electrician. I'm Jake Harlow, living in a cookie-cutter, beige-drenched HOA suburb that looks like someone got bored halfway through a SimCity tutorial and called it a day. My daughter Lily and I landed here 2 years ago, trying to piece our lives back. Together after a devastating car crash stole her mom and left Lily emotionally broken, barely able to speak. Therapy couldn't reach her, not until Peaches came into our lives. Not the fruit, but Peaches, a certified therapy llama with fluttery lashes, a tender heart, and a goofy habit of sticking out her tongue when she was content. We all have our coping mechanisms for trauma. Mine involve woodworking and the occasional pillow-punching session. Lily's was this sweet llama in a sunflower halter who'd nuzzle close as we brushed her while reading bedtime stories. Odd? Maybe. Life-changing, without a doubt. But this fragile piece came with a sharp thorn that threatened everything. Stay tuned for what's next. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any confrontation with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. The HLA president Karen. And yes, her name is actually Karen, not just by stereotype, but legally. On every obnoxious letter she's taped to my door. She wore pastel blazers like armor and carried around a clipboard as if it granted her divine right over fences, lawn decor, and the molecular structure of grass blade. Karen never liked Peaches. From day one, she called her barnyard livestock and insisted she looked at me funny. When I showed her Peaches' therapy animal certificate, complete with gold seal and psychiatric endorsements, Karen sniffed and muttered something about people faking documents. That llama had more credentials than most of the board members. Despite the hostility, we'd mostly managed a kind of Cold War day until the weird electricity thing started happening. It began one Thursday morning. I was in the garage working on a custom bench for Lily's reading nook when every power tool I owned suddenly blinked out. I checked the circuit breakers. Fine. I reset the outlet. Nothing. Then a few minutes later, everything came back on. Tools whirring like they'd been summoned from the underworld. I assumed it was a freak surge, but it kept happening. Lights flickering, the sprinkler timer resetting to H2O purge mode, whatever that was, and, most disturbingly, the heat lamp in Peach's stable clicking off randomly. I installed a voltage monitor. Readings were fluctuating like a stock market crash. Thinking maybe a neighbor was doing major electrical work, I did what any sane man would do, ask the HOA for information. Karen responded with a curt email stating, "No known electrical issues. Perhaps your equipment is substandard." Then she attached a PDF of approved outdoor decor standards for no reason. The mystery deepened when my neighbor Dave, a retired lineman with a bushy beard and a love for iced coffee, casually mentioned his garage opener had been acting up too. Then Julie, who lived 2 doors down and never left the house without a designer leash for her Pomeranian, said her smart fridge had ordered 30 lb of frozen clams without her approval. We all started connecting the dots. This wasn't a fluke. Something in our block's power grid was off. So I did the forbidden thing in any HOA. I started asking questions. I knocked on doors. I mapped complaints. And that's when I noticed a pattern. All the power issues were happening on properties that bordered the wooded area behind the HOA greenbelt. Now, here's the thing about that patch of trees. It wasn't on anyone's lot. It belonged to the HOA, technically undeveloped recreational space. Though the most recreational thing that happened there was teenagers trying to vape without getting caught. But lately, strange trucks had been parked near the trailhead gate. Pickup trucks with camo netting, gun racks and bumper stickers, like I shoot twice then ask. One morning, I followed one of the trucks. It was barely 6:00 a.m. and I figured I was just being nosy. But what I saw stopped me cold. A group of men in hunter orange and camouflage were standing by the edge of the woods, unloading rifles from the back of a truck. One of them had a printed map with highlighted zones, some of which edged dangerously close to our yard. I took a photo. Then I asked, "Hey, what's going on?" One of the guys looked me up and down and grinned. "Just helping the HOA with the deer problem?" he said. "We got permission." "Permission from who?" I asked. "Lady in the blazer gave us keys to the back gate," he said, tapping his temple as if he was revealing insider trading secrets. That night I went back through my emails. There it was, buried in the HOA newsletter's footnote, was a one-liner. New partnership with a wildlife management club to maintain green belt health. All members are licensed professionals. Except they weren't. I recognized one of the men from a viral YouTube video titled "Florida Man Shoots at Drone Hit's Own Truck." The power weirdness made sense now. Someone had set up a makeshift base in the woods, generators, trail cams, even a heating unit they must have jerry-rigged into our shared line. They were probably tapping into the HOA's utility box, and if Karen gave them access without telling homeowners, that was more than shady. That was potentially illegal. I tried confronting her directly. I waited until she was pruning her hydrangeas, with the focus of a heart surgeon, and asked, "Karen, did you give those hunters back gate keys?" She didn't even look up. "We have signed agreements with vetted wildlife technicians. Nothing for you to worry about. They're parking 5 FT from my fence. My daughter plays with her llama in that yard. Are you seriously not concerned?" She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe you should consider relocating your llama. Not everyone finds livestock charming." That night I installed motion sensors and upgraded all of Peach's stable lighting to battery backup. Lily drew a new sign that said, "Peach's lives here. She is a good girl. Do not scare her," and taped it on the fence. I didn't have the heart to tell her the kind of people we were dealing with didn't care about signs. Still, part of me hoped it would blow over, that the worst thing I'd face would be another HOA fine for unauthorized llama-themed fence art. But the next morning, I woke up to silence. No sprinkler buzz, no stable heat lamp humming, no hum of the garage fridge. I looked out the window. One of the trucks was back, only this time the men weren't at the woods. They were standing at the edge of my yard. One of them raised a pair of binoculars, and Peaches, unaware, nuzzled the grass in her favorite sunny spot. I ran faster than I ever have in my life. My boots hit the porch hard, knees buckling as I skidded down the steps and bolted across the lawn. I didn't yell. I couldn't. The air thickened with dread as I saw the man lower his binoculars and nudge the guy next to him. One of them pointed toward Peaches with his rifle. Not in a defensive way, not like someone checking safety range. No, it was casual, loose, thoughtless, like he was lining up a soda can. Peaches had no idea what was happening. She was lounging in her usual spot under the maple tree, one foot curled under her body, ears twitching gently in the breeze. I shouted, "HEY," just as the man shifted. The rifle barrel. Both men turned toward me, startled. I vaulted over the small wire fence and stood between them and Peaches, panting like I'd run a marathon with bricks in my shoes. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I barked, eyes darting between the two. One of them, a squat guy in his 50s with a tobacco-stained smile, cocked his head and said, "Relax, man. We're not going to shoot your pet. We were just checking for movement near the edge of the tree line. I pointed to the private property, signs nailed clearly to the post. That's my yard, and that's my daughter's therapy, Llama. You so much as breathe wrong in her direction again. We're going to have more than just a power issue to talk about. The other guy, taller, younger, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses, chuckled and tapped the laminated HOA badge clipped to his vest. We've got rights to be back here, Karen said. Anything beyond the utility trench was fair game. Utility trench? That explained the odd grid behavior. I'd seen a trench dug behind the community center weeks ago, thought. It was for irrigation. Now I realized the hunters had been tapping into our electrical supply like they were Netflix freeloaders on steroid. I turned and walked Peaches back to the stable, hands trembling, heart jackhammering in my chest. She walked calmly, leaning her neck against my arm like she knew something was wrong. I locked the gate, double-checked the stable heater, and went inside to call the sheriff's office. The dispatcher was polite but cautious. Sir, if they're on HOA land and the HOA president authorized it, you may need to take it up with the board unless there's a criminal act. What about unauthorized access to utilities? I asked. If you have evidence of tampering, we can send someone to investigate, but we'll need to escalate it through the county utilities office first. Could take a few days. A few days, that's how fast things could unravel when the wrong people were given power, literally and metaphorically. Lily got home from school at 3:15 sharp. She always sprinted straight to the stable, backpack still on, shoes half untied. I met her at the door, trying to keep my face neutral, but she stopped short when she saw the tension in my stance. "Is Peaches okay?" she asked immediately. "She's fine," I said. "But I need you to stay away from the fence for a bit. Some people are in the woods and they're not being careful." Her eyes widened like bad guys. I knelt and touched her shoulder like people who don't understand how important Peaches is. "But I do, so we're going to protect her, okay?" She nodded, chewing her lip. Then she ran upstairs, and when she came back, she had her plush llama, the one she clutched through every nightmare since the accident, and placed it on the windowsill facing the backyard, like a little guardian watching over the real thing. That night, I barely slept. I watched the backyard through binoculars like a paranoid hawk, switching between feeds on the motion sensors I'd installed. At 3:41 a.m., a light blinked in the trees, a flashlight. Someone was out there again. I crept outside, stayed in the shadows, and caught a glimpse of someone fiddling with a small metal box near the fence. I took photos. Then I saw the spark. A flick of a match, or maybe a lighter, followed by the unmistakable smell of burning plastic. He wasn't just stealing power. He was rigging something. The next day, I sent everything to the utility company's fraud department and followed up with a second call to the sheriff. Meanwhile, I walked straight into the HOA office, which was actually Karen's converted pool shed, complete with fake FCU's trees and a self-important desk nameplate that read Director of Community Affairs. She was sipping cucumber water when I stepped in. "Mr. Harlow," she said, without looking up. "If this is about your non-compliant solar string lights, I already filed a courtesy waiver." I slapped a stack of photos on the desk. "This is about whoever you gave keys to tapping into our electrical system and nearly pointing a gun at my daughter's therapy animal." She gave the photos a half glance. "As I've stated, the Sportsman's Club has signed liability waivers is an exclusive. Rights to the maintenance corridor. They're fully authorized. Then maybe you can explain why they're tampering with city property or why they're loitering 5 feet from a child's animal with loaded rifles." Karen smiled like a python in a sun hat. "It's a rural buffer zone. If you didn't want interaction with community partners, Perhaps you should have purchased a different lot." I narrowed my eyes. "I'm filing formal complaints. And if I find out you didn't get approval for that hunting agreement through a full HOA, vote I'll make sure you're removed from that desk before your fuse wilts." She shrugged. "You're welcome to attend our next board meeting scheduled 2 weeks from now." 2 weeks. I walked out fuming. The audacity would have been impressive if it wasn't infuriating. The next few days, I became a full-time investigator. I dug through archived newsletters, checked the county registry, and even chatted up a building inspector at Home Depot who let me know that no new electrical permits had been pulled in the area for months. Meanwhile, Karen sent me a violation notice for excessive compost odor. I didn't even have a compost pile. By Friday, the utility company finally called back. They'd confirmed unauthorized siphoning from the secondary junction box. A technician was scheduled for inspection. Tuesday morning, too late. Saturday morning began peacefully. Lily had a sleepover at her friend Ava's place. I was halfway through installing a new circuit breaker in the garage when I heard the shot. Not a pop, not a crack, a deep, echoing bang that reverberated through my spine. Then silence. I sprinted out the back door, legs moving before my brain caught up. Peaches was still upright, but swaying. Blood bloomed across her white fur like a nightmare watercolor. Her eyes were wide. She made a noise I can only describe as heartbreaking. By the time I reached her, she collapsed. I cradled her head, screaming for help, even though no one was around. I pressed my hand to the wound, called the vet, then the police, then Lily's school to tell them not to let her come home until I figured out what to say. Peaches died before the vet arrived, and in that moment the mystery changed. It wasn't about electricity anymore, it was about justice. The smell of hay still lingered in my clothes the next morning, and I hadn't slept a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Peach's face. Wide-eyed, panicked, betrayed. I sat in the kitchen with a legal pad, a cold cup of coffee, and a single mission: make someone pay. I wasn't just angry, I was sharpened. If grief is a dull ache, rage is a chisel, and I was carving out a plan. Lily still hadn't come home. She was staying another night at her friend Ava's house thanks to a very last-minute plea to the family that she stay one more night because the electricity issue wasn't fixed yet. That was a lie, but it bought me time. The vet confirmed the shot had come from a high-powered rifle, the type used for large game. She gave me a small plastic bag with a slug inside and said I should keep it just in case. That phrase made me sick. There should never have been a just in case for a therapy. Animal in a suburban backyard. At 8 a.m. sharp, I went to see Mrs. Dorsey, our neighborhood's unofficial archivist. She was in her 80s, didn't trust anyone under 50, and smelled permanently of lemon cookies and menthol. But she had an encyclopedic memory of every HOA regulation, amendment, and dirty little secret this neighborhood had coughed up over the last 2 decades. She greeted me wearing a gardening hat with a sunflower stitched into it. "Jake," I heard the shot. I didn't want to be nosy, but they killed Peaches. Her hand flew to her chest. Oh, honey. I sat at her dining room table covered in floral vinyl and laid it all out. The power anomalies, the trench, the unauthorized club, the rifle-toting man in my backyard. Her eyes narrowed as I spoke, and her mouth got tighter with every word. "That woman never filed the amendment," she finally said. "I'd bet my bonus on it." "What amendment?" "For a non-resident group to use HOA Commonland, there has to be a motion approved by a supermajority at a public board meeting. It's Article 14, Section B. Karen can't legally allow hunters access just by waving a pen. I thanked her, borrowed a few newsletters from her cabinet, and headed home to compile everything. Then I called my friend Micah, a tech-savvy freelancer, who lived just outside the HOA and owed me from when I rewired his workshop after he set it on fire trying to roast his own coffee beans. Micah didn't disappoint. By lunch, he helped me comb through public records and HOA documents online. We found no mention of a vote, no record of any hunting agreement, and most damning, no liability waiver on file for any sportsman's group. But then Micah said something I hadn't expected. "Hey, you've got an unusual draw off your transformer." "What? You said you've been having electrical weirdness, right?" "Well, your junction box is showing 3 more access points than normal, like someone's siphoning current from your line." "You can see that remotely?" Micah snorted. "Jake, your smart meter is connected to a cloud service the HOA forgot to secure. It's practically public." I stared at the screen as Micah clicked through power usage graphs, each one spiking at odd hours, late night and early morning. They weren't just stealing power, they were doing it from my house's distribution grid. "How much energy are they drawing?" Michael whistled. "Enough to run floodlights, maybe a small heater, maybe even power a surveillance drone. They're using this place like a hunting camp." That was it. I was done playing defense. I called the sheriff's office again and forwarded all my findings, including the photos, utility data, and the bullet casing. The dispatcher said someone would be by soon. That word now made my skin crawl. But I needed more than law enforcement. I needed attention, noise, outrage. So I did the only thing I could think of. I emailed the local news. Not just a casual tip. I gave them the full saga. The therapy llama, the shady hunters, the electricity siphoning, the HOA cover-up, the mysterious Karen clause that somehow let her authorize lethal recreational activities behind suburban fences. 2 hours later, a reporter from Channel 9 called me back. Her name was Robin. She was sharp, fast-talking, and already halfway through pitching the story to her producer before I even finished reciting my daughter's name. "People eat this stuff up," she said. "Corruption, tragedy, and a llama, it's basically viral crack." I winced at her wording, but agreed to meet her that evening for a filmed interview. When she arrived, she brought a cameraman and a bright yellow microphone that looked wildly out of place in my backyard. I showed her the stable, now eerily quiet. I even handed her Lily's sign. "Peaches lives here. She is a good girl. Do not scare her." Robin's eyes softened for a moment, then hardened with purpose. "We're going to bury this Karen." The segment aired. That night during the 6-telling news, by 6:02 my phone was buzzing. Texts, voicemails, DMs, even an email from a stranger in Oregon offering to send a replacement llama trained by monks in Washington. But nothing compared to the HOA's emergency meeting notice. Karen was hosting it in person, and it was scheduled for tomorrow morning. I attended, of course. Half the neighborhood showed up too, some out of concern, others out of pure entertainment. Karen stood at the front like a CEO trying to spin a failed product launch. "We understand there has been a tragic misunderstanding," she said, wearing a scarf the same color as Peach's fur. Coincidence or insult? I wasn't sure. The HOA is cooperating fully with local authorities. A man in the back shouted, "Did you give those guys keys or not?" Karen smoothed her scarf. "I facilitated access for environmental consultants vetted through a private third-party agency." Mrs. Dorsey stood up, waving a printed copy of Article 14. "Then show us the vote record, show us the waiver, or resign." Karen's composure cracked for a second, just enough to reveal panic under her boto. Then came the final blow. Robin walked into the meeting, camera in tow. "This is a public HOA meeting, correct?" she asked. "Mind if we film?" Karen tried to object, but the crowd turned on her like hyenas on a cornered antelope. Someone moved the mic to Robin. Someone else pulled up the news segment on a phone and blasted the audio. I didn't even need to speak. Karen imploded on her own. By the time I walked out, someone had already started a petition to have her removed. And that evening, when Lily came home and asked where Peaches was, I held her in my arms as gently as I could and told her the truth. She didn't cry right away. She just whispered, but she was a good girl. I nodded the best, and right then, I knew this wasn't over because now I wasn't just a grieving dad. I was a man with a cause. The irony hit me the moment I read Karen's appeal application. After everything, after the national headlines, after the court ruling, after the memorial garden and the viral video tribute, she still believed she could bluff her way back into power with a clipboard and a passive-aggressive note. The woman had more audacity than common sense. Her margin notes scrolled in pink ink. This situation was clearly blown out of proportion. Might have been the most tone-deaf thing I'd read since she tried to fine me for excessive emotional signage on Lily's therapy stable. But I didn't get angry this time. I didn't pace or scheme or fire off another batch of emails. I laugh, the kind of laugh that catches in your throat because it's equal parts relief and disbelief. Karen's attempt to return to HOA leadership was the final act of a farce that had long since collapsed. There was nothing left to fear from her, only paperwork and pathetic noise. Still, I knew better than to underestimate persistence, especially the misguided kind. Karen didn't need to win. She just needed to exhaust people enough that they stopped pushing back. That had always been her secret weapon. Bury you under rules, meetings, revisions, and circular arguments until you were too tired to fight. But this time I had energy left, and now I had a community behind me. When the next HOA meeting rolled around, I brought Lily with me. She'd insisted on wearing her shirt with peaches on it, the one a local artist had made after the story went viral. It showed peaches with a golden crown and a flower garland mid-stride under the words, "She was a good girl." It had become sort of iconic in our neighborhood, and Lily wore it with pride, her hand tucked into mine. The meeting was packed, standing room only. Karen was seated 2 rows from the front, trying to look composed in a cream blouse and her signature scarf, but she looked like a balloon about to pop. Her mouth twitched every time someone greeted me warmly or handed Lily a flower pin. Mrs. Dorsey opened the meeting with a crisp, no-nonsense welcome and then handed the floor over to the agenda. First item, appeal to reinstate board eligibility, Miss Karen Aris. The moment Karen stood, half the room shifted in their seat. A few people groaned audibly. One even muttered, "Here we go again," which drew a chuckle that rippled down the aisle. But Karen ignored it. She cleared her throat, pulled out a stack of typed pages, and began reading. Her speech was a mix of self-pity and gaslighting. She claimed she'd only been trying to enhance community involvement by bringing in certified wildlife experts. She blamed the misinterpretation of bylaws on the previous board and insisted the hunting club had been thoroughly vetted, even though their vetting process amounted to being her cousin and knowing how to turn off a safety switch on a rifle. When she got to the part about peaches, she paused for dramatic effect. "I deeply regret that one of our community's animals was caught in this unfortunate situation, but the animal in question was not on the registry of approved pets at the time," someone shouted. "She was a licensed therapy llama." "You troll." Karen flinched. So did her case. The outburst sparked a small wave of clapping, and a man stood up in the back and said, She made more of a difference in this neighborhood than you ever did. Karen tried to regain control. I'm merely suggesting that emotions should not dictate governance. Rules must apply evenly. I raised my hand. Then maybe start with the rules about not forging agreements, not stealing power, and not letting men with loaded rifles near my kid's animal. The room erupted. Karen's face went redder than a baked tomato. She tried to speak again, but Mrs. Dorsey rang the meeting bell and raised her hand. This board has reviewed the appeal, and in light of the ongoing investigation into fiscal misconduct, as well as violations of municipal safety ordinances, the appeal is denied. Karen froze. You can reapply in 20 years, Mrs. Dorsey added flatly. People clap, not politely, enthusiastically, like the end of a long, awkward school play where the villain finally got yanked off stage by a cane. Karen stood there blinking, lips twitching. Then she sat down so abruptly she nearly missed the chair. Lily looked up at me and whispered, "Did we win again?" I nodded. We did. After the meeting, I was approached by a man in a tailored grey jacket who introduced himself as Trent Maddox, director of a local foundation that specialized in community healing through service animals. "We've been following your story," he said, "and we were wondering if Lily might want to help us design a new program for kids who've experienced trauma. Something in Peach's honor." Lily's eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before the shooting. "Can I draw the logo?" she asked. "You'd be the lead designer," he said with a smile. Things began to change after that. Not in some magic wand movie ending kind of way, but gradually in the way real healing looks. Lily started sleeping through the night. Her nightmares didn't vanish, but she talked about them now. She got a miniature horse from a therapy farm, a spunky little chestnut mare named Clover, who had a habit of nudging Lily's hand every time she stopped brushing her. We set up a new stable together, smaller, more secure. The lights ran off their own solar battery this time. No more dependency on HOA lines or shady trenches. Micah came by and installed a new camera system, which Lily now helped monitor from a tablet. The memorial garden became a community gathering space. People came to sit quietly, some just to think, others to remember lost pets or loved ones. Lily planted sunflowers in the corner, and every spring they bloomed like yellow firecrackers under the big oak tree. Robin ran one final news story, a follow-up showing the progress, the new community programs, and Lily riding Clover under a soft sunset. The segment ended with Lily saying, "Peaches made me brave. Now I help other kids be brave too." That line ended up printed on a plaque near the garden bench. No one asked. Someone just did it. And that's how I knew the neighborhood had changed. As for Karen, she moved eventually after her third failed appeal, after being voted least welcome neighbor 3 times in a row, and after someone left a plastic llama wearing a judge's robe on her lawn. No one confessed to that one, but I have my suspicions, and I think Mrs. Dorsey owns a glue gun. Months later, I was sitting on the porch, sipping coffee while Clover munched grass and Lily read beside her. A neighbor walked by and said, "Hey, Jake, crazy how it all started with that weird electricity issue, huh?" I laugh. Yeah, funny how it all connected, and it really was because it wasn't just the stolen power lines or the rogue hunting club, or even the llama. It was about the things people think they can get away with and the quiet ways communities fight back when someone tries to make them feel small. Peaches is gone, but her legacy remains. In every flower in that garden, in every kid Lily helps, and in every HOA meeting where someone now dares to ask, "Wait, was this actually approved?" And as long as I'm living here, the answer better be yes. The days that followed turned my suburban cul-de-sac into something out of a courtroom drama, crossed with a wildlife documentary. If you'd driven through the neighborhood that week, you might have assumed someone ran over the mayor's cat, not a therapy llama. People were furious, some in sympathy, others because they were just thrilled to finally have a reason to scream at Karen in public. And Karen, she was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater in a dogfight. I knew from the start that HOA drama could get ugly, but I underestimated just how deeply Karen had entangled herself in her own lies. I mean, I expected pettiness, I expected evasiveness. I didn't expect to uncover a full-blown financial trail that involved off-the-books payments to her cousin's so-called wildlife management club, who were not only unlicensed, but also banned from hunting in 2 counties. That nugget came courtesy of Mrs. Dawsey, who had been quietly filing FOIA requests and digging like a truffle pig through every meeting minute and permit on record. "Turns out your buddy Karen paid them in gift cards," she said over tea, pushing a manila envelope across her table. "A bunch of Home Depot and Bass Pro Shops vouchers listed as community improvement incentives." "She used HOA funds?" I asked, stunned. "Not officially. She funneled it through a fake landscaping budget, all approved in a special session with no witnesses except her 2 puppets on the board." That was the moment things shifted. Grief had hardened into purpose already, but now it had kindling. This wasn't just about Peaches, it was about abuse of power, lies, and a total betrayal of trust. Lily's heart had been broken, and it had been sanctioned by someone who saw a little girl's piece as collateral damage for her pet project. I didn't want Karen fired anymore. I wanted her legally obliterated. I contacted a disability rights attorney named Clara Monroe, who took one look at the case, the photos, the emails, and said, "Oh, we're going nuclear." She explained that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, therapy animals, even llamas, had legal protections, and that allowing activities which endangered one without proper precautions or disclosure could be considered reckless endangerment. Add in the electricity siphoning, the forged approvals, and the misappropriated funds, and we weren't just talking HOA fines. We were looking at full-blown civil liability. The official lawsuit was filed 2 days later. We served Karen at the next HOA meeting in front of 24 people and 1 news crew. The expression on her face when she unfolded the letter was a masterpiece of disbelief and indignation. She gasped like someone had accused her of eating babies, then launched into a frenzied rant about vindictive homeowners and llama hysteria. That soundbite aired on Channel 9 at 7:00 p.m. sharp. Public opinion was no longer on her side. Even her board allies, Doug and Marcy, began quietly distancing themselves. Doug claimed he didn't know what he was voting on, and Marcy tried the "I was just following orders" defense. Neither landed well. Petitions were circulating. Local reporters were sniffing around the HOA books, and the county ethics board had finally gotten involved. Meanwhile, Lily was making slow, cautious progress. After 3 days of silence, she picked up her sketchbook and drew a picture of Peaches, wearing a superhero cape. She handed it to me and said, "I don't want them to forget her. I promised her they wouldn't, and I meant it." Robin the reporter came back and filmed a follow-up story centered on Lily and Peaches. It featured a montage of her artwork, photos of the 2 together, and a short interview where Lily whispered, "She made me feel safe." The segment ended with a simple line from Robin, all of this because one little girl's piece was treated like it didn't matter. It aired online and blew up overnight. Celebrities retweeted it. Animal rights organizations reached out. A therapy animal group from Colorado offered to train a new companion for Lily free of charge. A local farm even offered to donate one of their gentle miniature horses. The support was overwhelming, and for the first time in weeks, Lily smiled a genuine, full-faced smile when I showed her the messages. But the battle wasn't over. The court date approached, and Karen pulled every trick in the book. Delaying tactics, fake medical emergencies, last-minute witness retractions. But the evidence was unrelenting. Surveillance footage from my yard showed the hunters entering through the unlocked gate Karen had authorized. The trail cam captured one of them bragging that he thought it was a weird deer before laughing about scoring a trophy. Then came the clincher. Micah's digital forensic report showing the exact time the unauthorized electrical draw began and matching it to Karen's fake landscaping invoices. Clara walked the jury through it like a seasoned conductor. By the time she finished, Karen looked like a melting wax statue, fidgeting so hard she nearly fell off her chair. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was steady but razor-sharp. This court finds the HOA in violation of state regulatory code and in breach of community safety protocols. Furthermore, Miss Karen Arles is held personally liable for damages related to the loss of a certified therapy animal under federal ADA protections. We were awarded a significant financial settlement, including full therapy coverage for Lily, reimbursement for property damage, and punitive damages for emotional distress. Karen was fined, sanctioned, and barred from serving on any HOA board in the state again. When the gavel fell, I didn't cheer, I didn't pump my fist. I just looked at Lily, who sat quietly in the gallery holding the superhero Peach's drawing, and gave her a little nod. Karen's downfall wasn't over. The fallout continued for weeks. Her reputation tanked. She tried to move to a new neighborhood, but couldn't get past any HOA background check. Rumors swirled that her cousin's hunting club disbanded after multiple license suspensions and that their trailer had mysteriously caught fire in what authorities referred to as a highly flammable accident involving deer urine and fireworks. I had nothing to do with it. Probably eventually the HOA held a special election. Mrs. Dorsey was voted in as president unanimously. One of her first acts, erecting a community memorial garden in the green belt where Peaches had grazed. She named it the Peace Patch and posted a carved wooden plaque at the entrance. It read, "In memory of Peaches' beloved companion. She made us all better." People brought flowers. Even kids from other neighborhoods came to leave stuffed animals and drawings. One little boy dropped off a framed picture of a llama with angel wings and the words, "Guardian of Girls." Lily and I stood there one evening just after sunset. The sky was orange and purple. She held my hand and said, "She's not scared anymore, right?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "Not anymore." And just when I thought it was all behind us, I opened my mailbox the next morning to find a thick envelope. Inside was a form, an application for a replacement permit. Karen had filed to appeal her HOA board ban. She'd written in the margin, "There was no need to escalate this. A simple discussion could have solved everything." I laughed loudly long enough that the mailman walked by and gave me a concerned look, because now I was ready for